Welcome, everybody. I'm Allison Nagel, and this is Mary Frances Porter, and we're here today to tell you about the Impact Story strategy and why it matters for nonprofit leaders.
We have developed the Impact Story strategy because we see you. We see you working all sorts of hours for, let's be frank, less money than others you graduated with, because you're dedicated to lifting people up, equity, and striving for social justice. We see the struggle of the people you work with, and we understand your struggle. You probably raise just enough money to be sustainable, but you could be growing more. And maybe it's a struggle to keep your staff turnover low because you can't pay them what they're worth. Funders are always asking you to prove your work is making a difference. They want to know you're moving the needle or showing a good return on their investment. And I know you would not be getting up every day and facing these struggles if you didn't know you were making a real difference, even though the truth is it probably doesn't always feel that way. Your organization is probably big enough to care about measuring impact, but small enough not to have staff dedicated for evaluation. Maybe you'd bring someone on board or hire a consultant if you only had a better grasp of what you needed.
So if you've taken the time to watch this, we're going to make a little prediction about some things that might be true for you based on our experience working with nonprofits. We're going to predict that you most likely come from an organization with an operating budget of $500,000 to about $3 million, that you have a commitment to tracking impact, that you know you're doing good work, but maybe feel less confident in how to prove it, that you may lack clarity about the right data to collect, lack confidence about how you're collecting that data, and that you may not feel that you can really convincingly marry the stories of the people you serve with this data.
It's our years of working with nonprofits like yours that resulted in us developing Impact Story, our powerful strategy for communicating the work you do and the difference you make. We want you to be able to share your impact story with anyone, your team, your board, your funders, your community at any time. We want you to feel clear and confident about telling a story that moves people to action. We're going to do this fast, but here's what you'll walk away with today. You'll leave knowing about an uncomplicated process that demystifies what you need to tell that impact story. You'll leave with an understanding of what you need to incorporate the impact story strategy into the way your organization operates day to day. And you'll leave with a list of things you need to tell those convincing impact stories for fundraising and more.
So imagine that right after this presentation, you check your email and you see that you have an email for a large grant that's perfect for your organization, but it's due in 2 weeks. The RFP is asking for 500 words that demonstrate the impact of your programming. Take a second and think about how you'd feel. How long would it take you to prepare for this? How confident would you be that you were writing the right things on a scale of 1 to 5? I imagine you'd feel kind of stressed out. Maybe you'd have to clear a whole day or 2 off your calendar in order to pull it all together. Maybe you'd feel pretty confident about doing it, but it's daunting and it's a lot of work. Now let's imagine that right after this presentation, you get a call from your board chair, and she's just found out that you both need to go in front of City Council today for 10 minutes to make a case for why they shouldn't cut your funding through an economic crisis. This might be more stressful. It might take all day just getting the right information together to have these really crisp, concise bullet points. So this kind of thing happens all the time, right? What if the situation was a wealthy philanthropist who calls saying they've got this spare $100,000 to give away, but they want proof that you'll be able to give them a good return on their investment? Or what if a board member is asking you for talking points because they're going to a cocktail party tonight and they're going to be kind of rubbing elbows with some important policymakers? What if you need to talk to some of your program managers about boosting their area's productivity? And what about your own organization's 5-year strategic plan? You need to be able to present a coherent story about the previous 5 years in a way that gives everyone what they need to tackle challenges, but also highlights your organization's strengths. These kinds of things happen all the time, and you need to be able to confidently tell a clear and convincing story about the impact your organization is making, both for the people and for the community at large. So if you're like we used to be, answering these questions might feel pretty overwhelming.
And when I started doing this work back in the early 2000s, I was really overwhelmed. All the different data and the data needs ran together into this big mush. And in graduate school, I had learned strategies for designing evaluations, but I was taught how to do fancy research with complex statistics. And I knew that wasn't what nonprofits needed or frankly wanted. What I learned in school helped me answer academic questions like, does high quality preschool work and for whom? But it didn't answer the questions the nonprofits I was working with had, which were, are the people I'm working with getting better? And how do I convincingly tell funders about that?
Right. So as you're imagining all these scenarios and all this time and effort that's involved in preparing for each of the different scenarios, think about how amazing it would be to have all this information right at the ready. And at the ready, meaning you know the range of stories you can tell, you have the structures in place to capture them, and you're able to pluck out the right story with the relevant information for anyone at any time, anywhere.
That's exactly what we came here to talk about today. The 3 steps to having the right story with the relevant information anytime you want. These 3 steps are rooted in what we learned in academia, so they aren't really new. But after more than 20 years of working with nonprofits, we have retooled, simplified, and customized them to work for you in real life. And that's what's groundbreaking today. Today, we're going to teach you what it takes to be clear, confident, and convincing when talking to fundraisers, and how to use the impact story strategy to increase funding and so much more for your organization.
So first, we should probably introduce ourselves a little bit, and then we'll talk about the impact story strategy and how we know that it works.
So I'm Mary Frances, and even before I finished graduate school, I'd started working with nonprofits in my community, sharing with them everything I was learning. Now, almost 20 years later, and 15 years after founding Partnerships for Strategic Impact and working with hundreds of clients, I've homed in on the unique challenges you all face and seen exactly how the ability to tell your impact story is crucial, not only for making sure the people being served are getting better, but also for building the relationships and resources that you need for your organization to thrive.
Yes, she's wonderful. I'm Allison. I also have my PhD in clinical psychology. I also studied social justice oriented psychology and facilitating change specifically through creating really supportive groups. So for me, I was always really interested in community systems and in the work of nonprofits. The reason that I really took this step forward in working with Mary Frances is because of more personal reasons. When I was in graduate school, I had my first child, and he was born with a number of medical issues and some really complex needs. And so his ability to survive and to thrive in these early years completely depended on this whole team of people, including a lot of really dedicated service providers from a number of our local nonprofits. So now I'm here making sure that you and other nonprofit leaders have what you need to be able to support your staff and do this work that I know literally changes lives. So we want to highlight a few transformations from organizations like yours to tell you a little bit about how we know that Impact Story has been really effective.
So the Building Goodness Foundation is a nonprofit construction organization. And Courtney came to an intensive set of group coaching sessions focused very specifically on building a strong framework for telling an impact story. After 3 classes, she walked away with a 1-page map that clearly showed how her mission led to impacting the community. And this felt revolutionary.
It was. Ready Kids is another example. This is an organization that Mary Frances has worked with for over a decade. They provide the Charlottesville area with family support and early learning opportunities. And one day they called us because they have this amazing van, and it's like a preschool on wheels. They drive it into under-resourced neighborhoods. They open their doors and they just like create these play groups out of nothing. It's magic. And everyone loves it in the community. And the organization knew that the moms and the kids were getting these really important benefits, but they needed evidence to support what they were doing. So we brainstormed together, did some research, and we were able to support what they were doing and create tailored surveys. So now they're re-energized, they're better focused on the specific impact they're actually making, and they're better able to talk about what they're doing with confidence.
And then JABA is a nonprofit that supports communities for healthy aging. Since 2015, I've been helping my friend Ginger develop story frameworks and surveys for all the areas she oversees. Ginger says that they used to do bean counting, but now by just focusing on what they did, but now they get to focus on the value of their work. The story framework has helped her know what's most important. It's even helped her cut some things that weren't performing well. And it's actually made the philanthropy department's work much easier.
So these kinds of transformations are pretty typical of nonprofits that implement parts of the impact story strategy. In the summer of 2020, as we were all kind of reeling from COVID quarantine, we did a survey of everybody that we've worked with, regardless of the type of training that they attended or consultation or coaching that we did together. And we heard from almost 200 people. And about 8 of 10 of our clients have taken pieces of our work together and directly applied that in grant writing and in fundraising. This is what the Fluvanna Louisa Housing Foundation says about having worked with us. They say we are financially stronger and have created a model that other organizations have contacted us to replicate. We have a strategic plan for the future, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so we know that impact story tools have helped nonprofits like yours in the past to raise money. So what exactly is the impact story strategy? Let's dig on in. All right, so first is kind of a big picture of how it works, and then we'll really break it down. We're going to take a deeper dive into just a few of the pieces. So there are 3 main steps. The first step is being really clear about what you do, what you don't do, and why and how you expect to make an impact. Planning out your comprehensive strategy so that it'll be successful. The second step is gathering the evidence of your impact. This means confidently collecting all the data and the information that's going to bring your story to life. And the third and the last step is learning how to tell those powerful stories using really convincing visuals, using client journeys that don't just tug on heartstrings, but that actually move people to action. So this right here on the screen is the full model. It creates a complete picture of your organization's impact that speaks to your needs and your wins in a way that will move people to write checks. And without funding, your organization ceases to exist. So let's really break it down. We're going to go, again, a little deeper into some things. We'll just touch on some other parts. But remember that you can reach out to us at any time. We'd love to talk about this.
Great. All right. So let's start off with the very first thing you need is a really solid framework. Some common frameworks are called logic models or theories of change. And many of you probably know about these because they're often things that funders ask for. I don't know about you, but I've found them clunky and confusing and only very rarely useful outside the specific grant application. As I've worked with nonprofits, I've seen that what they really needed is a way to connect their vision and mission to exactly what they do. And then they need to be able to draw clear lines between the specific program and how much work they're doing and the impact of that work on people that they serve. In ImpactStory, we have this really cool, innovative framework, which I've called a strategic impact map. You end up with a 1-page graphic that connects your vision for a better world to the specific programs and strategies you use. Then it shows how much work you do and how that work results in immediate impact. Plus, it shows how that immediate impact rolls up with what other organizations are doing to create community-wide change.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just like how it was for Courtney at Building Goodness that Mary Frances mentioned earlier. So it was really a relief to her and us when we kind of discovered this framework, and it helped make everything feel really manageable. Once Courtney had a strategic impact map in her hand, she felt kind of invincible. Like it literally revolutionized the way that Building Goodness thought about what they were doing, because they were able to talk about exactly how what they offered their clients resulted in specific knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay, so after we introduce each of the impact story strategy pieces, we're going to give you a little chance to do a self-assessment and see how your organization is doing on each of these pieces. So some we assume you're going to be like nailing it, like we are amazing at that, we need no help, and others you might feel really unsure about, and that's totally to be expected. So to start out with story frameworks, take a second and see where you're at from red light, yellow light, green light. Red light here would mean that you don't really like have a framework. You maybe feel like you know what it is, but you maybe stumble when you try to talk about it. Yellow would be that you can talk about your framework if you had to, but it's a little bit messy. You don't have kind of a go-to single document that sums up everything that you do. And green would be that you have a go-to framework and a story about why you do what you do and exactly what impact you expect to achieve as a result.
So just take a note for yourself about where you are, red, yellow, green. You could even jot it down. We're going to be asking you these kinds of questions throughout the presentation. So the next piece of mapping out your strategy is basing what you do in programming that's already been shown to work. Right before I went out on my own and founded this company, I was in charge of program evaluation at UVA, at the Center for Positive Youth Development. But I struggled to figure out how the heck I was supposed to help local nonprofits prove that working with teens after school led to happy, well-adjusted adults. After all, we just had them for a year and not a lifetime. So after about 6 months of research, I discovered a shocking but very simple truth. You, the nonprofit, are a service provider, not a scientist. Here's what I mean. Doctors are service providers, and no one expects a doctor to prove that what they are prescribing is specifically resulting in the people they're serving getting well. Doctors are supposed to understand what works and prescribe that. Then their job is to make sure their patients are getting the treatment and actually feeling better. You are like a doctor. All you need to do is to be able to talk about why what you're doing is supposed to work, and then make sure people are getting that and getting it better. Because you're not a scientist, you actually cannot prove that what you're doing has an impact. You can only show that people are getting better. And this is why you should be using programming that has already been shown to work by science, just like we use medicine that we know has been proven to work by science.
Yep.
So this was exactly what was going on with Ready Kids. They are child development experts. They knew that what they were doing with that preschool bus had value, and they could see it in the faces of the families they served. But they didn't have the right information to tell a convincing story. So we did some reading to find the science backing up their impact story, and then we developed surveys that would uncover that story.
Amazing. Okay, so take a second and think about where you and your organization are with programming that you know works. Red here would be you're doing work that feels good, but you maybe can't really talk about why it's a good idea or point to anything that specifically demonstrates that people are going to benefit in the long run. Yellow would be like, you know that what you're doing has value. You've heard it's a good idea. You've like read things that kind of are convincing, but you couldn't put your hands on the actual science right this second. And then green is, you know, you're doing something that's been demonstrated already by researchers to improve people's lives, and you have that science on hand to back it up, which is amazing. Good for you.
Go you. Right.
Okay, so now we are moving on to step number 2. For step number 2, we're going to touch a little bit more lightly. Just remember, you can always reach out to us to get more information or to talk further. So 2 is all about understanding your impact. Lots of organizational leaders lack confidence in their ability to understand their impact so that they can tell a really true and compelling story. And one of the reasons people lack confidence is because they feel pressure to have all this scientific knowledge. And while you don't, thank goodness, like Mary Frances was saying, need to be an actual scientist, you do need to have solid information about how to create smart surveys. And what that means is creating smart, efficient surveys by asking the questions that help you tell your story. You need to ask if the people that you're serving have gained knowledge and feel good about using it. So, you know, I can't tell you how many times we've sat down with nonprofits and they say like, well, how do we find out if people like say learned enough about starting a small business to actually do it? And we're like, yeah, we should ask them that, right? Did you learn enough about starting a small business to feel confident about starting one, right? So ultimately, it's not hard to ask the right questions, but you have to be really clear about the story that you're needing to tell so that you set yourself up from success at the get-go.
So let's do this traffic light assessment on surveys. Where are you with having those? Maybe you aren't actually collecting any data right now other than maybe who's being served. Maybe you're collecting some data, but it's reactive rather than proactive, meaning that you collect what your funders are asking you to collect rather than what you know you need to collect in order to tell your overall story. Or maybe you have some surveys and other data that you collect that is focused on capturing the story you know needs to be told.
Which would be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. So let's go on to data analysis. Scary? Well, do you need to be a scientist in order to crunch the numbers? I'm here to tell you, you definitely do not. In fact, Allison and I don't use any of the statistics we learned in grad school. Most nonprofits that I've encountered are working with 40 to maybe a few hundred people a year. They don't have comparison groups and they're working with people a relatively short time. To analyze this kind of data, all you need is good old Excel. The fanciest statistics you need are averages, really. Honestly, there are only about half a dozen Excel formulas that I really lean on. Here's the big secret to data analysis. It's graphing, mostly bar charts and line charts like the ones you're seeing now. These are critical to being able to help you see what your data is doing and what's happening. So you do actually need to learn the basics of Excel, and you have to have someone on your team who can really graph well. Sometimes you might want to use a database, and we've got lots of information about that and when it's needed. But much of the time, graphs in Excel are where it's at, and that's pretty painless.
Okay, so where are you at with painless data analysis? Rad being like, well, I just count stuff. I just count a lot of things, and most of that is on paper. And then I have lots and lots of stacks of paper. That'd be red. Yellow here would be more like you can use Excel and you can make a graph, but you're not super confident. Maybe you feel like you're cheating or like not qualified to even interpret the data in the first place. Green would be that you have all your data already in a database or in Excel, and that you can make graphs and you can pull up reports and that you can see kind of what's going on really whenever you want.
Okay, so if we have clarity around the story that you're telling, and you're now confident that you're collecting the right data and you're able to look at it in Excel, now you need to know how to really tell a story that gets people to invest in what you're doing, whether that's to invest dollars or invest time in being served by you or invest time in being your employees. So you need some data visualization that is eye-catching and clear and effective. Now, there are lots of tips and tricks for making data visualization magical, and we have lots of those and mountains of them. But what we often overlook is that audience really matters. People outside your organization, they usually just want the highlights of a very curated story. They want visually rich one-pagers for your press kits. They want simple graphics for your social media. Maybe they want a series of graphs for a grant or an easy to read annual report. You are literally spoon feeding the stories to these audiences. You've already identified the takeaway messages and you're handing them only the information that backs that up. Well, now internal folks, that's a different story. They need more detail so they can make decisions about how to strengthen the organization. Internal folks are going to want streamlined dashboards that give them more detail but are relatively high level, and so they can just sort of monitor how things are going. Just like when looking at budgets at home, you might want enough detail to know what's happening, but you don't want to see every single bill that's been paid. I'm going to give you another tip. The very best strategy we have for helping nonprofits understand their data is to create stories is creating a data team. This is a small group of staff plus maybe a board member who get real comfortable looking at the data. They feel confident understanding the story behind the data. And just like when monitoring a budget, they learn to look at the data and notice red flags, rejoice in reaching targets, and ask about changes in patterns. This does take a little bit of practice, but it's not rocket science, and we have templates for how to do all of this. This is what I've been helping Ginger with. We're figuring out what information needs to be visualized on internal dashboards. She wants her managers to have templates in Excel where they can enter the data that matters most. Then when she meets with them monthly, she can ask her managers to explain why specific trends are happening and what they want to do to address it. This, guys, is data-driven decision-making.
Yeah, it is. All right. So where are you with clear data visualization? take a second and reflect on your organization. Are you, in the red zone where like maybe you aren't really ready to graph and create visuals with your data yet because maybe you just like don't even have the data? Are you yellow where you have graphs and visuals, but maybe you either have one set of visuals that you like use all the time, or you're constantly creating all kinds of different visuals, but there's no real strategy there. And green, that's the color. Green here would be that you already have branding or templates for how you show your data, and then you just kind of plug in the different things that you need, and it populates and makes these beautiful graphics like at the touch of a button.
I tell you, it's pretty awesome once a nonprofit has a real clear idea of how it is that they want to create their graphs. It makes it so much easier.
Right. And the relief of just being able to like, bloop, bloop, so pretty. It's already right there.
All right.
Okay, so we are on to step 3 of a 3-step strategy. How exciting. You're ready to tell people a story that moves them to action. What does that mean? So here you want to remember that the secret to telling stories to people that are outside of your organization is starting with the story that you already know you want to tell. The point you're driving home, the things that the person you're talking to already really cares about. So most of the time, we do this by focusing on a specific real or composite client who has a very compelling story that showcases your organization's strengths. This is a tried and true technique, and it's made even more powerful when you highlight their success with the total number of people who have achieved the same success. So adding data to your client's story makes it more believable, and it puts the achievement in context. So, we didn't just help Jordan achieve his goals. 70% of students who are just like Jordan also achieved their goals. Another thing you can do is talk about what resources you may need to lift up those 30% of students, right? So you might say like, if only we'd had one more skilled staff person, we could increase our impact. Or maybe you need a different kind of service to get to those 30%, right? Maybe you say, oh, our data show that most of the people who, unlike Jordan, weren't able to achieve their goals, weren't proficient in English. And now you have the data to make an argument for getting the funding to get that one thing done.
Yeah.
So here, when you're telling your story, it's the human story that pulls at our hearts and it paints the picture. The data and the visualizations are what help us believe it, build trust and credibility, and ultimately moves us to action.
So let's think for a minute about where you are with telling powerful impact stories. Maybe you've got some personal client stories and maybe some data about how much work your staff are doing, right? So just some quotes and some numbers of hours or numbers of people served. That would be in the red zone. In the yellow zone, you've got some tried and true personal client stories you always use, and you've also gotten some data, but you're generally making sure that you're including both of them in your writing, but not with any kind of like strategy or clear intentionality. Mm-hmm. In the green zone, you have some go-to personal stories and key impact data already identified, and you're able to weave them together to build empathy and trust in your impacts.
Mm. That's the dream, right?
That's the dream.
All right. So we've dipped our toes into each step of the model. Let's kind of zoom back out and review all the pieces and make sure we know how they all fit together. So again, the first step here is setting yourself up to ensure impact by mapping out your strategy with a super solid framework, using programming that has already been shown to work so that your story is clearly set up for success. Then the second step is gathering all the pieces of your story by collecting the right data using smart surveys, and then simply analyzing it so that you can see what it's actually telling you. And the third and final step is telling those stories with really masterful data visualizations that catch the eye and make a really clear point, and then intertwining human stories with your data to create the most powerful version of your impact story. So if you have all 3 of these steps in place, you should be able to check off this list of things that you need in order to tell your impact story to anyone at any time. So the list is, I'm able to talk about the key impact we're working towards. I am able to explain why our programs are expected to lead to long-term change. Our surveys ask the questions about the key impact that I need to demonstrate. I have key impact data at my fingertips. I have a file of personal client stories that speak to each key impact data point. And I match personal client stories with key impact data when telling our impact story.
So why do you need all this? We know that the impact story helps you build a strong case for funders to invest in your work. And you're able to use that information to report back to them on the return on their investment. What's really important, and we want to mention before we end today, is that having a clear impact story does more than ease the burden of fundraising. And I'm going to let Allison talk a little bit about what else it does.
Like all kinds of stuff. So it allows you to create clarity around what you do and, importantly, what you don't do. So this helps prevent mission drift, and it helps prevent you from putting too many resources into something that's actually only tangential to the core impact that you're trying to achieve. It empowers the people you serve to give you feedback about what's working and what's not working for them. This is an equity issue. They can't choose to buy or to not buy what you're offering. So you can't use sales to measure success or know if what you're doing is useful to the people you serve. It gives you the information you need to guide decision-making by letting you know what's working and where you need to make adjustments and what to prioritize when you're moving forward. It helps motivate your staff. There's a lot of corporate research that shows that staff who have access to and who use data are actually more motivated to achieve their goals. And perhaps more importantly, it gives your work credibility, and it builds trust with the people that you're working so hard to serve and all the partners who are working with you.
So if you're able to do all these things, you're able to talk about your impact story and use it in all these ways, what kind of benefits does that result in? Well, it lets you have the systems and structures embedded into your workflow that make data collection seamless. And this is money saved in improved efficiency. You'll have everything ready to go every time you need it, and no more scrambling and spending days collecting information. And this is your time saved, which I know you need. You need some of that time back.
Yes.
You'll also be able to tell those masterful impact stories that draw out empathy and build trust. And this is more effective fundraising. And you won't have to stress. This is the kind of relief is really pretty priceless.
So now you know 3 things that you didn't know before you came today. Listen to us, so thank you. The first thing you'll know that you know are the 3 steps of the impact story strategy, which focuses you and your organization and what you need to be able to tell your story. Second, from those traffic light assessments, those self-assessment check-ins, you know where your organization could improve and what you do. Third, and for your reference, you have this checklist at the end of what's needed to really easily tell your impact story. So this does not have to be crazy hard. You don't need a PhD to be confident in the impact story that you're telling. You don't need to spend time that you don't have Googling all this disjointed and frankly, like really kind of hard to implement information about impact evaluation. And you don't have to take this piecemeal approach of finding and taking a whole variety of classes, trying to piece it together yourself.
One thing you can do right now is pull up the last grant application you wrote. I want you to see if you're using key impact data and weaving in personal client stories that bring that data to life. If so, you can leave this presentation with a sigh of relief because you're doing it right. If not, then from answering the traffic light questions earlier, you know what holes you need to fill and how to be intentional about seeking out those solutions.
So if you like what you're hearing today and you want to learn more, we hope that you join our mailing list and receive some regular blogs on all these topics. You can connect with us on social media and be a part of the conversation. Use our curated library of resources that we've already picked out, annotated, and organized. They're just for you. They're already on our website. So you have immediate access to the resources that you need for building and telling your story. And when you need more hands on deck, check out our growing consultant directory and contribute to it so that you can really easily find consultants who have already been recommended by your peers to help with just about anything that you need. You can also email us directly with questions, set up a free, no obligation call with us through our website, and stay on the lookout for classes, for coaching opportunities, for intensive workshops that we'll be offering that'll help you build the skills that you need. So thank you for watching this, and we look forward to getting to know you.
Thank you guys. Bye for now.
Good.
Yeah, I don't want to.